everyone, my name is Elena, and this is my channel Spinoodler, where as the world burns, we read together. So, today I just wanted to do a chill video recapping the books I have read so far for a reading challenge that I've been doing called TBR Trek, that is hosted by Kim from Expedition Through Pages. And in this game, we are assigned different teams, and my team is Team Gnome, led by the indomitable leader, Ruby. And basically, we have different prompts, and we play a kind of board game together once a month, and then the team has to read the prompts that were assigned. And some prompts are just individual, you read a book that matches the prompt, and some prompts involve activities where you read a book and then you do an activity based on that book and you report it in the Discord. And other prompts means the team has to come together and coordinate. So this time around in Team Gnome, we have to read books from 10 countries that share a physical land border. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. But I'll give you a preview of what I've picked for this round moving forward. But I thought, since, I've been having a hard time with reading, I thought it would be good to reflect on what I have done. So these are not all of the books I have read since the beginning of January, but it is a lot of the books I have read because I have slowed down in my quest to find gainful employment. So, without further ado, the first prompt that the gnomes had to do was read a book with a G in the title. And so I read a book that I had started reading a long time ago, but I had to start from the beginning, and this time I got the audiobook, called The Case for Rage by Myesha Cherry. And this is a philosophy book, and before everyone closes the video, yes, it is, nonfiction. It is more technical. Out of all of the philosophy books I have read, and I'm biased because I have read a lot, I don't think this is the most inaccessible. I'm not going to say it's an easy read, but I definitely do recommend it to more than just philosophers. I do recommend it for philosophers. But I recommend it for anyone interested in social justice and racial justice. Basically, Myesha Cherry makes the argument that philosophers especially, but also some political theorists will say, rage is a bad emotion. Rage is not productive. Rage is something that we must learn to sublimate in order to, have civil discourse and debate. And Cherry argues that based on her analysis of Audre Lorde's philosophy, that specifically rage motivated by anti-racism can be channeled in an important way for the process of resistance, basically. So basically, it's the case for rage. It's saying, before we sign off rage completely and we say, oh no, that has no place in our society, we have to think about, why are we feeling rage? And how can we channel rage to fight injustice? And Cherry argues specifically in the case for anti-Black racism, but I would argue we can apply this argument for lots of other social justice causes. So if you're interested, I do recommend the audiobook. It might be easier to keep pace, but also buy the book if you can. Support Myesha. Second prompt was a free pick. We got to pick whatever you wanted, so I sneakily put in something for her kid. Maybe I'll do a her kid video at some point. But this was the prompt for the Intersex book. And this is a YA novel that I listened to called Icarus by Ancrum. And so it follows the story of a young boy who is intersex, but the story's not about him being intersex, but his father is involved in like organized art forgery. And anyway, he falls in love with the son of his father's arch nemesis. It's really cute. I would recommend it if you want like a really cute men loving men YA love story. I gave it a 4.25, so I think I enjoyed the experience. I feel bad because I was like, I'm not going to rave about it. Like, The Case for Rage for me was a 5-star, but that's such like a different genre. I would say Icarus is a solid YA romance with intersex representation. So there you go. There is a recommendation for you. And then the third prompt I did was an anticipated read. So this is a book that, either we were really wanting to come out, or like since it's come out, it's kind of sat on our shelves and we really want to read it, but we haven't done it yet. So I finally got to read La Tercera by Gina Apostol. So I have read Gina Apostol's novel Insurrecto years ago, probably like 2018 or whatever that came out. And okay, so Gina Apostol is a Filipina author, and I'm on a quest to like broadening my horizons when it comes to Filipino literature or literature by authors of Philippine descent. And Gina Apostol's Insurrecto kind of broke my brain. It is the kind of like literary novel that kind of messes you up because of its structure. And so I was anticipating La Tercera because the concept of a woman having to return to the Philippines from New York to deal with her late mother's estate and encounters like the complicated family sagas that happen there was like a premise that I found interesting. But I went into it knowing this would not be an easy read because Insurrecto took so much of my mental energy to try and follow. So I would definitely caution people by saying Apostol's writing is like the dictionary definition of like literary fiction, in the sense that it is not accessible. I'll just say it. It's not accessible. You have to really like focus. But that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. I really quite like Apostol's writing. It's just like, it's not something that is like light or like a thriller that will go fast. It's like really slow paced, and it goes back and forth between different points of views, between characters and timelines as well. So I would say if you are a fan of Isabel Allende, I would give this a try. It's the most similar thing I can think of when it comes to like family saga, and like there's not quite any magical realism in La Tercera, but there is a lot of, the exaggeration that comes from family stories being passed down and like half remembered and like reconstructed, and like different people remembering different events that happened to like the larger family differently. There is a genealogical tree at the back, just to tell you this is like an expansive family saga. So if you are a fan of Isabel Allende, I would pick this up. And if you are curious about a certain period in the Philippines when, the family deals with the occupation by the people from the US, and how various family members position themselves vis-a-vis that colonization and occupation. So, definitely not light and fluffy, but I would say worthwhile. Okay, now we go to another literary pick, which was a free pick. And I read Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Now, I will say Martyr was great fun for me, because it was exactly the level of pretentious that I am. So it's about this queer Iranian American, and again, it goes kind of with flashbacks and with stories of family and this idea that, how do we find identity as like a member of the diaspora when we haven't lived in that country for a long time. The main character's mother has died, and so he grew up with his father who was always working. And, it's themes of coming of age and queerness, and the main character is also going through a sobriety journey and all of that. And I just found it really interesting. I think, especially now in the context of the war with Iran, it is really useful to see, how these conflicts have a backstory, basically, and have lore, and that the people, living in the US today, like, have that lore in their body as well, and in their questing. And so I would recommend this book, to people, again, who enjoy literary fiction, exploring family connections, exploring queerness in non-white bodies. But I will say it is a debut, and I can kind of tell. I don't want to be harsh because I feel like if I were a writer, this is the kind of stuff I would write. It is really pretentious, but it scratches like my pretentious itch. So if you're okay with that, I would say go ahead. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5. Oh, and I gave La Tercera 4.5 as well. So you can kind of tell now I'm a I'm a literary snob person, but that's okay. That's okay, because you will read something that will scratch your pretension and your itch or your trope or whatever. And this is why we love the fact that there are so many books. Next, we had a group prompt. So this was, we had to read translated books from 10 different languages. So we didn't have to read each 10 books, but we had to come together as a team and make sure we didn't duplicate languages. And I have had this book on my TBR for so long because it's actually really hard to find a book from Suriname. And I will like fess up and say I could not have placed Suriname on the map before reading this book, and now I can. Isn't knowledge wonderful? So this book is called Off White by Astrid Roemer, and it was written in Dutch because Suriname, that is a country in the northeast South Latin America, was colonized by the Dutch. It was in between French and British Guyana. So I also did not know that there was a whole country that like speaks Dutch, at least historically, in South America. So the more you know, colonization is wild. So Off White. So it talks a lot about, it's again a family story. It follows mostly the grandmother, B or Bernadette, and then her various children and grandchildren. And so it's kind of seeing the impact of colonization in terms of like the grandmother is very light skinned, and so she calls herself like Off White and is very proud of her French and Jewish heritage. And then, she marries a man who was considerably darker skinned than her. And then to the point where, like, when one of her children turns out darker, her husband ends up sending the child away because, like, he sees that his wife is not treating her the same. So yeah, there's a lot of trauma there. I would say please read the content notes before going in. There's a lot of different kinds of abuse and sexual trauma going on. There's also incest. There's teacher-student relationship. There's lots of stuff going on. So I would say it was very instructive. Like, I feel like I learned a lot and I had a real feel for the place. Which, if you've watched my Half His Age review, like, I didn't have a feel for that place at all. But I really, like, was there with the characters, so I do think, like, the writing was good in that way. It is just, like, a lot of trauma. So be ready. And also, I found that this is a translation, so I don't know, but the repeated use of off-white, even when, like, describing foods and things, became a bit heavy-handed. Yeah. So also, like, because of said abuse, a lot of the characters have mental health issues, and so yeah, be prepared to read about that when you enter this book. But again, I felt like my life is better from having read this book because I learned so much about Suriname, and I learned it from someone from there, right? And not just someone talking about the country. So I would recommend that if you are curious, just really read the content notes. The next one was a book set outside of the country we live in, but it has to be in our real world. So it can't be like a fantasy or a sci-fi. And I chose Good People by Patmeen Sabit. And I gave this a 4. Well, no, I gave this a 3.75. Oh, I gave it Off-White a 4. Interesting. Yeah, I guess the overall experience of Off-White I really liked. Yeah, Good People by Patmeen Sabit. So this is good. This is like an Afghan American thriller book. So if you are a fan of, like, Sadie, if you like the kind of true crime vibe, like, this is fiction, but it has a true crime vibe of, like, a family that goes missing, and then their daughter, like, falls off, like, the path that they had for her as, like, immigrant Afghans in the US. And you have, like, interviews with lots of, like, neighbors and colleagues and friends of the family and stuff like that. And basically the premise is, like, good people. It's like, what is a good immigrant? What is a good migrant? What is it to be a good child, a good daughter, specifically in a Muslim family? What does it mean to make your family proud? What does it mean to have prejudices against Muslim people? And so I thought it was interesting. So I gave it a 3.75. Like, I thought it was good. I just didn't love it as much. Like, I had to go back and look at the synopsis to remember what it was about. So yeah, that should tell you. But I do think it's great to see more diversity in genre fiction, and especially, like, thrillers, which is very, very white dominated. I think this is a solid book. I just, if we're looking again at the kind of immigrant narrative, family drama, I really, really love Gold Diggers by Sanjina Sathian. I will recommend that over Good People, but it's not a thriller, so it's different. It's different. It's just, like, when I was reading Good People, I couldn't help but think of Gold Diggers, and I have a preference for Gold Diggers. But why don't you go read both? Go read both. Support these authors. We love it. Okay. The next prompt was actually quite daunting for me because it is first on YouTube you can get a hold of. So newest video on feed. So if you just open YouTube and you see, like, the first, like, book related content. Wait a second. Excuse me. My cat is being naughty.
A few moments later.
All right, I'm back from my cat being the worst. Okay, so yes, this was daunting because I tend to follow booktubers that rant, like that have rant reviews. So they basically read books that I have no intention of reading, but they're very zeitgeisty, like Colin Hoover books or Frida McFadden. And they have, like, yeah, it's basically books I have no interest in reading. Because that's what I find entertaining. When I go to, like, BookTube, I am part of the people who will seek out negative reviews. Because I'm terrible. So yeah, so I was afraid. I was very afraid that I would have to read a Colleen Hoover book. Um, just because, like, that's not at all what interests me. And I was already in a slump. I was like, you don't want to have to read something you really don't want to read. But I lucked out because the first video that came up was Frankie's Shelf, and he was reading The Listeners by Jordan Tannahill. Now, The Listener's premise intrigued me because it's about a suburban mom who starts, like, hearing this hum, and, like, no one else can hear it, and no one else believes how debilitating it is. And so it slowly isolates her from everyone, and then she finds, like, other people in her neighborhood who can hear it, and so they kind of, like, meet because they're the only people who share that experience. But then her, like, husband and her daughter are really upset, and they wish, like, she would just pretend that the hum isn't happening. Like, and it turns into, like, is this group that she's found a cult, like, and so I thought this was interesting, but I was apprehensive because, well, my day job is looking at hidden disabilities and disbelief in medical settings, and I'm also someone who lives with a chronic illness and has faced a lot of medical disbelief. And so I was, like, bracing myself for, like, everyone to turn against this woman because they didn't believe that she was suffering. I will say, I think Tannahill did a really good job. You can see that he's a playwright. I was taken out a little bit, and I don't know if, like, I live in the UK and I got the ebook from my library, so I don't know, like, if it's in the UK edition they, like, changed some terms, but, like, the book is, like, vaguely set in the US, but then they talk about, like, GPs. I was like, do people in the US say GPs? Like, I don't know. I grew up in Canada, which is also where Jordan Tannahill lives, and I'd never used GP. I would use, like, family doctor or primary care physician. GP is really a term that I started hearing and using when I moved to the UK. So, yeah, I don't know. Oh, I'm slowly being absorbed by the light. No. That helps a bit. Yeah. So, yeah, so there were just, like, a few words that kind of took me out because I was like, I thought this was in the US, maybe, like, Southern California. It clearly tries to give a kind of Wisteria Lane vibe. And ultimately, I gave it a 4. I thought it did a good job. It was, as I suspected, challenging for me. And, you know, I really liked Frankie's review, but they were saying, like, oh, obviously, like, this woman is so unlikable. And I was like, is she really? Like, don't get me wrong, she does some questionable things. And again, content warning for, like, inappropriate relationship with a high schooler that she teaches. Like, I feel like I can't escape these adult child awfulness. So yeah, so I'm not saying that she's great, but again, I kept thinking of the movie Safe. That's a 1995 movie directed by Todd Haynes and starring Julianne Moore. And it has a similar premise where this affluent white woman suddenly starts having symptoms of like environmental kind of allergies and things like that. Um, and so again, it's something like you can't see. And it's things like she goes and she buys like a couch that she spent so long, choosing, and then she's allergic to her couch, basically. So it's like it's in the air, it's in the fabric, it's in everything. And so again, like she goes to the doctor, and then she goes to the psychiatrist, and then all of these things, and basically she only finds solace in a group of other people she finds like through a flyer at the Y, or the community center. And then it ends up like she goes on a retreat, and it's like kind of sketchy, and is the guy leading this a cult leader. And the movie kind of gives you this idea of like, these are the people she found solace in, but also are they kind of dangerous? And is this like bad for her to be around other people who share her symptoms? And I remember seeing this with a room full of medical doctors, and they were all like, "Oh, I really want to shake her, and like I pity her. She has no agency." And I was like, "Wait a second. I just watched like 20 minutes of like doctors disbelieving her like harrowing experience. Can you really blame her for like wanting to hang out with people who don't tell her she's making it up?" And I think the movie is really interesting because it was made in 1995, but it was like started. Todd Haynes started to write it in 1987, in the upswing of the AIDS crisis. And so he really wanted to take up, but like, what about I take someone who is like, seems so far removed from the stereotypical AIDS or HIV positive demographic, a straight, white, rich woman who lives in a fancy neighborhood that has no crime, is not a drug user, and doesn't lead a quote unquote high risk lifestyle. And so, what do we do if something happens to her that no one believes and that she is punished for expressing? Kind of like all of the men and all of the trans women and all of the people in the queer community who were saying, hey, something is wrong. And there was a systemic, disavowal and message from politicians and from the medical establishment that like, we are not looking into this. You've done it to yourself. We don't really care if you die. So I think in that sense, like the movie Safe is like really, really rich. And the listeners really reminded me of that. But again, I preferred Safe. Don't be mad. But yes, I did give it a 4. Again, I was agreeably surprised. I just had to take some, time to deal with the major kind of like disbelief that this woman in the listeners was feeling. Okay, let's mosey on along to Grave Inheritance by Vivian Shaw, which was, the prompt was read a book and make a picture out of the book or book covers inspired by your read. So Grave Inheritance is the 3rd installment of the Dr. Greta Helsing series by Vivian Shaw. I would describe these books as urban fantasy adventure. Like, I've discussed it before as like, it's kind of like a cozy fantasy if you have, vampires and like monsters that's trying to destabilize the balance between heaven and hell. And so there's always like someone being murdered and stuff. So that's the kind of cozy that I want. I want cozy with like political stakes, basically. But the coziness comes from the found family of all of the characters, and it's very cute. I did not love the second book, but that was mostly because A, it was set in Paris, which I personally don't care about, and B, most of it was the main character kind of stuck on the ground alone and separated from all of her friends. And I was like, no, what I want is to see you interact with your friends. So that is back in Grave Inheritance. And what is fun with Grave Inheritance is it is set at a spa for mummies, not like a fancy like yummy mummies mom, but mummies as in ancient Egypt mummies. And so it's a spa where they kind of go get fixed and or like relax. So for the picture, I kind of did books in colors of yellow and blue, and I made a sarcophagus to symbolize like the fact that the spa is like carved into the rock face in Marseille, like by the sea. So it has like the yellow and blue. I will also say this book involves a heist and a vivid description of hell. So it was very fun. Very fun, very fun, very fun. I give it a 4. Yes. I am looking forward to reading the 4th and last installment in this series. And then I will have finished the series Staircase for her kid. Okay. Now, there's only 2 more. We can do it. We can do it. So the other one was another group prompt where we had to make an outfit out of books. So every book had to have an item of clothing from like the head to the shoes. And so I did the hat, and I chose Bad Queer by Gayathiri Kamalakanthan. And I had the pleasure of having Gayathiri do a seminar for my work about self-advocacy and disability. I really recommend them. But they do lots of stuff, but including they've worked a lot in sex education with young children. And so Bad Queer is a verse novel with illustrations that follows a non-binary, agender, Tamil kid who, has 2 queer parents, including a non-binary parent, and so has like grown up with like a very accepting nuclear family, but also experiencing the tensions with like their grandparents. Like they have grandparents that don't talk to them, and the other grandparents kind of like are in their lives, but only after like their parents have done like a lot of work, and they still don't use they them around Surya, the main character. They just call them Surya. So it's kind of like acceptance, but qualified. And then, so it follows Surya, this young non-binary Tamil kid who falls in love with a boy. And it's about like the feelings of being a bad queer, about like not feeling like they can come out even to their queer friends, because they don't want to have to explain over and over again like how they relate to their gender, but also like falling in love with a cis boy as a non-binary person assigned female at birth. There's a lot of questions about like, does he understand that I'm not a girl? And then he says he does, but then he gets the wrong pronouns, and then he doesn't want to introduce them to his friends and his family because he's afraid they'll get things wrong. And it's just like complicated, and it's like this idea of feeling a burden because apparently being yourself is just like too much for the people that you love. I think it was very touching. I will say content warning for a grandparent with dementia, because that is a part of the plot. It did make me cry. But it is a beautiful, beautiful book. And I think every like teenager should read it. I think every adult that has ever felt like a bad queer should read it. I mean, with all the book banning, like I don't think it will make its way into schools, but I wish it did, because I think it's like a great kind of intro to sex education and understanding like what feels right for your body when you don't want to have normative sex. So yeah, 5 stars. Go read Bad Queer. Okay, we've gotten here to the last book, Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke. Okay, so first of all, I just fell in love with this cover. The cover design on this is gorgeous. It's like a ripped half page, and at the top you have like a very pastoral, like luminous view of like cows on a hill with the sun in the background, and the bottom half is a woman's face with her eyes cut off, but she is like perfectly angled and has the kind of like sun-kissed makeup on, so like a pinkish orange lip, and then like a lot of blush and a lot of contour, and it's like snatched and like highlighted. And this is a thriller about a tradwife, and I have to say, together with like a lot of the planet, I have been consuming a lot of content around tradwives, mainly through Fundy Fridays and Viral Virtue, and who else? Yeah, I don't know. I've watched a lot of YouTubers that cover like Ballerina Farm and things like that. So I was like, beautiful cover, tradwife, thriller, horror. Sign me up. I will be honest, I listened to this in one go as I was traveling from Sheffield to London Heathrow, and because of the state of the railways in the UK and the fires by the rails and all of the delays, I basically finished the book in what should have been like a 3-hour trip. The book was over 7 hours long. So we'll say no more about that. But I probably like missed some details. But I will say it was really enjoyable. It flew by. I gave it a 4. Like, I don't think it's a masterpiece. But again, as like a genre book, I think it's very topical. They did a good job like publishing it now. This is the right time for that. And like, I got the audiobook, but if you can get that cover, man, because there are other covers and they're not as nice, but if you can get this cover, like, I would get the cover art. I would get that as like a poster, because it's just the perfect encapsulation of the moment. But anyway, so yeah, so a lot of literary fiction, no surprise for me, some fantasy, some thrillers, some nonfiction. I kind of went around the block. But now, in case you're curious, the next prompts that the gnomes have for the TBR Trek are: read a book written before you were born. Okay, so I've been putting off this book for a long time. My brother gave it to me because he's very invested in my science fiction education. A Fire Upon the Deep by Vernon Vinge, which I think won a Hugo Award in the 70s. So it's like old school sci-fi, and it's like 600 pages. So it's also like a pocketbook, like, so it's written very small. So I'm scared, guys. I'm scared. But it's been on my shelf forever. I really want to read it, and it fulfills the 600-page prompt for her kid. So please send me your thoughts and prayers. I will read Fire Upon the Deep as I look for more jobs. Okay. The second one, read a book and do an activity inspired by it. So I haven't picked the activity, but I assure you it won't be like a dangerous one. It is Survival Show by Juno Dawson. And I actually bought this at the Sheffield Independent Book Festival, the first of its kind, this weekend. And it got signed by Juno, and that's great. And it's basically, the tagline is Hunger Games meets X Factor. And Juno was talking about like how she was really inspired by K-pop and the K-pop academies. So basically, the premise is that we're living in a near future dystopia, and this young girl, basically they can't find any medicine for her brother, and her chance at getting like a lot of money is to go on this reality TV show. But the reality TV show is tied to a eugenicist project called Project Population, where they try to cull people from the planet to control the population. So basically, if you get eliminated, you die. So those are the stakes. And it's such a ridiculous cover. It's like bright pink with like glittery like silver emojis on it. It's actually quite ugly, but like it's ugly in like the campiest way possible. And I've enjoyed Juno Dawson before, so I don't know. This premise is just wild enough that I had to start reading it immediately, and it's paying off. So I have scary like vintage sci-fi, and then Hunger Games meets X Factor. And then finally, oh yes, we're going back to being serious, guys. So this is the book from 10 Neighboring Countries, and the Gnomes Have Picked Asia. And I will be reading a book from a Thai author called Moving Parts by Prabda Yoon. And so it is short stories. So again, like a different style going here. This is published by Tilted Axis. I do love supporting Tilted Axis. I will say the last Thai author I read was not the best. But again, I've only read one. So, like, I can't judge all of literature for a country, obviously. So I'm excited to read this as well. They say it's surreal and puncturing short stories from a Thai master of the form. So I love surreal and puncturing short stories. I'm in. So yeah, so I will be reading that. And so that's a wrap for what I have read and what I am about to read for TBR Trek. If you're participating, let me know in the comments what you are reading. What was maybe your favorite book from what you've read so far? I will say that my favorite book was Bad Queer. And my most surprising book was The Listeners, definitely, because I really thought I wasn't going to like it, but I did. So there we are. I hope that you can read everything that you want to read, and that what you don't want to read and what you can't read is none of your business anyway. So until next time.